my broad issue philosophically is I think that the word is being misused. Extinction's forever, it's irreversible. If there's another term for recreating or resurrecting things, yeah, I mean, they're probably a little bit closer. But even then, I think it's a really dangerous precedent to claim we can fix some of these irreversible problems that we have contributed to.
Welcome to the Mongabay newscast. I'm your co-host, Mike DiGirolamo, bringing you weekly conversations with experts, authors, scientists, and activists working on the front lines of conservation, shining a light on some of the most pressing issues facing our planet and holding people in power to account. This podcast is edited on Ecological land. Today on the newscast, I speak with Dieter Hochuli, a professor at the School of Life and Environmental Sciences and leader of the Integrative Ecology Group at the University of Sydney. Hochuli and several of his colleagues wrote a piece in The Conversation detailing why the quote-unquote de-extinction technology that the biotech startup Colossal Biosciences is working on promotes false hope and can't undo extinction. The wolves that Colossal Biosciences unveiled to the world this past month are not dire wolves, as many scientists and geneticists have already pointed out. They are gray wolves with edits to 14 genes in their DNA, a small fraction of the tens of millions of differences between gray wolf DNA and dire wolf DNA. Colossal argues that while these aren't actually dire wolves, they look like them and serve their function. Hochuli tells me otherwise, and he says calling them functionally a direwolf or functionally de-extinct is wrong. He explains that the concept of de-extinction isn't just misleading, but dangerous, incentivizing governments and the public to not care about the conservation of existing species on the false premise that they can be resurrected. He also unpacks the impracticality of this technology and its approach, pointing to the high failure rate of species reintroductions and captive breeding programs for existing species, and all of the ecological barriers that make de-extinction a problem. Instead, Hochuli urges conservation of existing species and ecosystems, pointing to the need to bolster funding for methods we already know work. Hi, Dieter. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Mongabay newscast. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So before we talk into the ecology and the ethics of this situation, can we first establish, have dire wolves been quote unquote de-extinct? Why or why not?
One of the challenges is that a lot of us find the actual term de-extinction to be a word that doesn't really mean as what it says it really means. But if you're asking, have dire wolves been recreated? I think even the creators of it, the people that have manufactured this, have highlighted some of the shortcomings of what they've got and the barriers that they face. They're not saying they're exact replicas. They're pointing out that it's basically a recreation of something similar at best. I think they've been really honest at making that case there. I think the marketing of them as being de-extinct is probably a little bit different. If you're asking, has an animal that used to walk on this planet that went extinct been recreated and is now walking back, I think there's a school of thought that that's not the case.
So then let's examine what is the problem with the word de-extinction?
The problem with the word de-extinction for many ecologists is that we see extinction as an event as being an irreversible event that has finality about it, a bit like death. The idea that you can reverse those sorts of things is anathema, I think, biologically, but also philosophically and ethically. So the idea that you can actually bring back something that's lost with a copy of sorts doesn't sit well with many of us. So it's probably asking us to accept losing all the great works of art, but keeping some of the great copies of them. So that's probably where the term really sits poorly. We see extinction as being irreversible, and that once these entities are lost from the planet, they're lost and gone forever.
And so ecologically speaking, why is it not possible to bring them back?
It's certainly possible to reintroduce any number of different things to try and bring back ecological function, if that's what we're trying to talk about. Because one of the things that we're always interested in with extinctions is what the flow-on consequences are when animals are introduced into systems or lost from systems, whether it's pollinators or apex predators. So there's a potential you can reintroduce the function. From an Australian perspective, a few years back, people were talking about the potential to reintroduce African megafauna to replace the megafauna that Australia lost many thousands of years ago, the big herbivores that used to be running around, the giant wombats that were there. That's probably not something that's as popular as it used to be, but it was seen as a way of reintroducing an ecological function. From a conservation perspective, I guess the issue is basically this notion that the species are lost forever. The other challenge we face ecologically for things that may have been lost 10, 20,000 years ago, we really don't know what their function necessarily was, what their densities were like. And we also know that the systems that those animals were running around in have changed dramatically since they were lost through climate shifts and human occupation and human changes to landscapes. So the idea of trying to recreate these historical systems is probably not something that even makes sense from a restoration perspective. Even when we look at restoring damaged systems, things that we've damaged quite recently through mining, forestry, agriculture, we're moving away from trying to recreate historical systems and trying to see what can we build back that's sort of functional in the here and now.
Hey, and thanks for tuning in to listen to the first few minutes of this podcast. There is a lot more to this interview, but if you want to hear the full conversation, find the Mongabay newscast wherever you get your podcasts from and click subscribe. You can also get each new episode straight to your inbox by subscribing to Mongabay's weekly newsletter at mongabay.com. And if you really want to support us, you can donate to us at patreon.com/Mongabay. Don't forget to leave a review, and thank you, as always, for listening.